2014, the International Communication Association honored Vernita with the Best Visual Display of Research Award. She's currently receiving her PhD at the Institute of Communications Research, College of Media at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Her research employs critical ethnography, critical neuroepigenetics, and political economy to explore the cultural, biological, and political relationships between music and human rights. She bridges theory, policy, and practice, translating and making rigorous scholarship accessible to the public through multimodal formats. Her current dissertation work is titled Music and Human Rights, a Critical Transdisciplinary Analysis. She holds a Master of Science degree from our school, the School of Forestry, with a focus on evolutionary biology and tropical ecology, and a Bachelor's of Science from the University of California, Berkeley in Natural Resource Systems Management. Vernita is, as you can tell from her bio, a true Renaissance woman. We're very glad to have her here, and I'm excited to hear how she's going to tie these threads together. Please join me in welcoming Vernita Pearlfort.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian, for the introduction. Thank you, Maclovia, for first inviting me back. I'd like to personally thank Yale University for an extraordinary education and for all the opportunities that I have had as a result. So I want to go on record that this has been an incredible, incredible journey. This happens to be my 40th anniversary since graduating from Yale in 1976. Cannot believe it. So it is a pleasure, it is an honor to be back. So as he said, I'm going to take you through this journey. And there's the Yale logo, Forestry Environmental Studies. That's the USAID logo. After I graduated from Yale, I went to New Alchemy Institute to do some research, and then I went straight to the Foreign Service as a diplomat with USAID. I continued to do arts throughout my whole life in the background, sometimes having to hide it, given the institutions that I worked for. And at the end of the day, after a long career of after 30 years, I'm still doing some music, as you heard. I'm still doing some dance, and I'm still passionate about trying to make the world a better place in terms of human rights and social justice. So one of the biggest things that Yale gave me is systemic thinking. There is a thing called thinking like an ecologist. For me, everything is related. As an undergraduate at Berkeley, I think in my first 2 years, I must have taken classes in almost every department. I was fascinated with about everything. As I talk about these concepts in terms of systems thinking, I want to focus in terms of the types of ways system thinking can be used. There's the actual thinking process, everything is related, and there's so many models available to us. There's the transdisciplinarity work. That's the work that I'm doing right now, really trying to engage, for me right now, the ethnography on one hand, neuroepigenetics on another hand, and political economy on another hand. But that requires discourse, that requires engagement, and that also requires being ready. And when I talk about systems, I am in no way putting down at all disciplinarity and very focused, high-quality research. You cannot have transdisciplinarity without focused quality research. So I just need to make that very clear. Also, I think that this way of thinking, this way of doing is critical right now as we address some of the biggest crises of our time. And that has to do with inequality, or the alternative, human flourishing for everybody, climate change, climate justice, and the violence that we see today. Now, I believe that all of these issues are connected, since they are connected, I do believe that we do need to work in a systems way with each other. So I am going to argue through this, and I was asked, I said, I can give one technical talk that's very focused, and I was told over and over again, no, the students want to hear about your experience, and so you have to talk about your experience. So I'm going to do that, but I still want to make an argument, and we can have a discussion about the actual argument if I am making it well enough at the end, but I want to have that in the discussion part, but I want to lay it out. I think it's necessary that we think about restructuring the political economies in which we live, local, national, and global. These political economy structures, I think, are creating so much of the devastation that we experience in terms of what the science is telling us, in terms of the ecological crisis that we face right now, the inequalities that I mentioned before, and the violence. I think that's important, but it's not sufficient. We also have to think about reorienting and evolving the consciousness. So some of the work that's being done on neuroscience, neuroepigenetics, anyway, again, we need the restructuring. It's important and necessary, but not sufficient, but we have to realign, reorient, and evolve our thinking. I am of the belief, and thanks to my evolutionary ecology teachers, that evolution has not stopped, that we are in this moment of being able to co-create our futures, and our decisions right now will determine the outcome. And so I think the ecological thinking, the systemic thinking is critical. So I'm going to tell this story just walking through my shoes, having you walk with me in my shoes. I'm going to use what's called critical ethnography. And critical ethnography, does anybody know critical ethnography? Does anybody do critical ethnography? Critical ethnography means that not only are you looking at a situation or an event, but you are looking at it as a part of the community. You are actually making an analysis saying that I am a part of this community, and you're highlighting the power relationships at play. You're also being very explicit about values. I believe that everything that we do in terms of our intellectual work, the values are embedded within, but often we do not articulate them. Also, it's about dialogue and exchange, and also it's about, I'm going to blow this up. The ethical responsibilities. So as I talk about human rights and I get there, the discourse around moral values, I think, is becoming increasingly important so that we can, as human beings, get on the same page. I'm going to start at South Central Los Angeles. Here's my story. Grew up in South Central LA, 1960s, 1965 riots, lots of turmoil, civil rights movement. It was a period of movements. There was a civil rights movement, there was women's rights, there was the decolonization movements, the independence movements, the environmental movement. All of that was taking place. The art and music was just exploding, and I do not think it is coincidental that all of this was happening at the same time. Just want to give you a backdrop. That was my world. I also had parents who believed education, and I also had all of these movements were very exciting to me. My father would get very concerned, though. I was an avid reader, and I just spoke with one of the students earlier who's an avid reader. And so when he would find things like the Red Book or Karl Marx on my bedside at age 13, he was a little upset. I did not know why he was so upset. I did not know about the McCarthy era. I did not know that he could have been in harm's way. And then I said, but I wanted to go to Berkeley. I knew Berkeley, that's where people were actually asking the kind of questions that I was asking at 18 years old. And I had an uncle who said, oh, Vernita, you don't want to go there. You're going to become hippie, radical, or pregnant, or all three. Well, he got some of the first two right, a little bit of the hippie, a little bit of the radical. But yet, I lived kind of an ordinary life in many other respects. There was Girl Scouts, there's Jack and Jill, and yes, the Black Panthers were in my neighborhood, and yes, I was a reader, yes, there was piano, yes, there was music, yes, there was all of that. And yes, there were oil drills and pumps in my neighborhood that I'm only now learning as of the last few years how critical this is. I know it's critical, but I did not know that I had grown up in the midst of one of the greatest problems in the United States in terms of Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. Anyway, the city of Los Angeles has been sued for all of the drilling and in that place minorities at harm's risk much disproportionately compared to the rest of Los Angeles. Anyway, I headed off to Berkeley. I did not know what I wanted to do initially. As I said, I was doing something in every department, and then I did education abroad in West Africa. And I was at the University of Ghana. And at the University of Ghana, there were a lot of questions in the air about population perhaps being something that people with power were trying to use uh, to manage populations in other parts of the world, African populations, making them smaller. There was that kind of talk in the air. But as a student, I said, let me go look at that. Let me go look. And I went and I did population research at the University of Ghana. It was fascinating. And I began to learn about population dynamics and what have you. I also studied the Akasambo Dam, which is one of the first major dams projects in West Africa. Was able to study the schistosomiasis, the flooding, and all of the after effects, the displacement. And for the first time, though some of my friends were talking about the environment in 1970s, many of them had talked about it as a luxury, open parks, green space. When I got to Africa, I discovered that it was an issue of survival. And at that moment, I said, my goodness, and I had been thinking about becoming a doctor, a medical doctor. And in that time at the University of Ghana and with my research, I said, I think I want to become a land doctor. Now, my father was not very pleased with this. He was not very pleased at all. Oh my gosh, my baby's going to study soil and water and dirt and trees and birds, and oh my gosh, she's going to become a farmer. What did I do wrong? And I really, really think that part of his concern had to do that he was just too close to slavery in terms of African Americans being on the land and what that meant and what that represented. And for so many people, it was such a big, big push to move away into the thing furthest from the land possible. And so when he came to visit me at State Department one day, and I took him to the executive dining room, and I said, Daddy, you like the broccoli? He said, yeah. I said, do you like the rice? He said, yeah, it's pretty good. And so we kept on talking. I said, yeah, somebody's got to know how to do that, you know? And said, well, at least you're going to be an international pig farmer. But I don't know what you're experiencing today, but something is shifting, which is so nice. It's almost like the African American community, with the disproportionate abuse in terms of the environment, is beginning to really take a hold and really make a big difference in terms of the climate change issues and the discourse and environmental degradation. So it's really fascinating to see. Yes, at Berkeley also. So wherever I went, I would always make sure that there were dancers or musicians that I wanted to work with. This is Martha Graham. This is Catherine Dunham. I didn't dance with them. I danced with their proteges, people who used to be in their companies. For Martha Graham, her top company members used to run the dance department at Berkeley. Catherine Dunham is another incredible dancer, and her protege was also in the Bay Area at the time. I came here, and I came to Yale, and I had a chance to meet some of these incredible, incredible folks. This is Professor Borman, Professor Sycamore, Professor Brown, and Dr. Hutchinson. And there's so many others I could go through, but I'll just tell you the story about just two in terms of Dr. Borman and Dr. Sycamore. It was the tropical ecology program that really drew my interest, because I knew I was interested in working in Africa and in the poorest countries in the world. That meant the tropics. So when I saw that, I said, I'm here. We got to the rainforest of El Yunque in Puerto Rico. Is that course still going on? Yeah, good, wonderful. Okay. It's morphed, okay. But I'll just tell you, we were there for a good while, from soil pits to water samples to climbing to the highest parts of the mountains to find sea skeletons up at the very top. I mean, I was just amazed. They were even more amazed than we are, because they had more science knowing, I think, to know the miraculousness of what we were in the middle of in terms of the diversity. And one afternoon they said, okay, you guys, everybody put down your shovels. So sit down on the forest floor. We did it. And if you knew Professor Borman. And then he said, okay, lay on the forest floor. We said, oh, he's having a moment, okay? So we laid on the forest floor, and he just said, now close your eyes. We said, oh, this is serious. But actually, he had us listen. He had us listen. He had us listen to all of the music. And then he began to talk about the number of species that were in that forest that we were hearing. Then he said, now just pick up whatever's next to you and just put it in your hands and roll it through. Their excitement engendered ours, and also just what we were seeing and learning was just amazing. And I just want to thank those two gentlemen for exciting me and propelling me more. There were so many others. Professor Howard Brown, who taught planning, and every year he would take us to, well, before I go there, that's a little bit of El Yunque, but every year he would take us to University of Pennsylvania. Anybody know who Buckminster Fuller is? Yeah. So we would go, and Bucky was running the World Game workshops every summer. Now, those experiences as well, I just said, it was like your brain had a chance just to open and explore. What Bucky did, he brought engineers, ecologists, theologians, social scientists, medical doctors, musicians, everybody together. And his main question was, how do we get the world to work for 100% of humanity? And here I am talking about the same kind of idea. So I'm going to blame Yale. I'm going to thank Yale. But those kinds of experiences were incredible. This was another kind of experience, though. At the end of my coursework, I wanted to, I was fascinated with evolutionary biology, and I wanted to study the origins of race in the human species. And I received so much pushback. Choose another species, choose another species. I still don't quite fully understand. Choose dogs, choose ponies, choose cats, choose another species. I said, I love Homo sapiens. I love Homo sapiens. We're really fascinating. I just want to better understand all the variation in the species. And I was even using all the scientific concepts. I don't understand exactly what happened, but it was Evelyn G. Hutchinson, and I did not know the stature of these individuals as a 25-year-old woman at the time. I had no idea, but Dr. Hutchinson stepped in and just made that right. You're shaking your head, so maybe you have an answer for me. I don't. It was quite amazing. So he stepped in and he said, this is important work. She needs to do this. And then there was Dean Mergen. I also wanted to study land use planning among African-American farmers in the South. So he worked with me in acquiring funding so that I could do that, and actually did a paper on it. And again, I have to find my ladies and my dancers. So Carmen de Lavalade was here. I knew she was here. An incredible dancer, and she's still dancing in her 80s. It's really quite remarkable. And so let me just get on to the diplomacy part. Before, I guess I was halfway through my second year, I said, oh, my goodness, I'm going to have to find a job. I was in an international magazine, and I knew I didn't want to do international work. I found this little ad about this big in an international journal about looking for professionals to do these kinds of things. We're going to we need to at least have a master's degree in international experience. And so I sent in a note to USAID. I got a packet, and I filled it out and sent it in, and then I got a plane ticket to come for an interview. And a few months later, I was working with USAID as their first diplomat ecologist. So USAID and state had been sued by an environmental organization for using pesticides overseas that had been banned in the United States. The settlement of the lawsuit was that they had to establish environmental regulations because there had not been any to date, and they also had to hire ecologists. And so so it was really quite wonderful to be the first ecologist, where I actually got a chance to lay the groundwork, and USA became recognized over the first few years of having one of the best environmental programs in the world, but in part it was mandated. And again, and I had more freedom, and I was able to accomplish more, I think, than almost any point in my career during that period. The strategy I used, because there was still a lot of resistance, if you can imagine people just going in and doing whatever they want. So the strategy I used, we're going to design out the problems instead of, designing something that is the traditional way and then having to fix it. They said, what do you mean? So there was a pineapple packing and producing activity that was going up in the Ivory Coast where I was living. I was based in the Ivory Coast. There are 25 countries where I worked. I worked in all 25 of them. So I'm just giving you one example. The engineers said, well, we're just going to plant the pineapple, we'll harvest it, we'll throw the race in the river, and that's what we always do. I said, no, why don't we try this? Why don't you plant the pineapple, but make sure you do a watershed assessment to find out that this is the best thing to do, and the best plant to use, the best product to use, and the best way to do it. And if it is, then why don't we think about how to use that waste instead of destroying an incredible river and stream that is habitat for fish and water source for many people. I said, why don't we use that waste, put it in an anaerobic digester? Why don't we create some methane? Why don't we create medicinal alcohol? But that kind of way of thinking was absolutely new. And I think then that was 40 years ago, but a lot has changed. And I know a lot of you in this room are part of the process of continuing that on. But I also had the experience of many folks on my team who, let's save the elephants and let's save the chimpanzees, and which is so, so important. And I also would have them do, since we all had to do environmental impact statements, because for them, environment was motherhood and apple pie. I said, well, why don't we do a poverty impact statement on your environmental project? It was, what? I said, yes, what I was trying to do is get them to include the human species as part of this landscape. And so it began to happen, and it was a great experience. So these are just, as I said, I worked in 40 countries. So in each of those countries, we're talking about multi-million-dollar programs and many different kinds of projects. So again, the systems approach was at work every step of the way. Every step of the way. There are also just a lot of race stories, and I want to bring this up because I think it's important that we have these very positive and constructive conversations about race. I can tell you about an experience when I was working in Southern Africa, and I had to go to a conference, and they weren't going to let me in. Apartheid was still in place, and I had a diplomatic passport. So they had to let me in, and so I became a white person honorary white, for a week. And that's how they handled it then. The race factors just still continue. I had been asked to leave hotels sometime in Africa because some of the big fancy hotels, they would often only see the white clients, the white tourists, the white professionals pass through. The same with beaches. Okay, same with me. But these conversations we just need to have in as constructive a way as possible. And also finding ways and to be had as in as constructive a way as possible. After the Africa tour, I needed to get to the policy table. I said, we had so many successes on the ground, be it Lucina plantations, be it the herding projects, be it the watershed projects, be it the forestry projects, so many successes, but they were very micro in scope. And also, I said to have them become macro, they had to have a policy foundation for changing the policies that had created the problems in the first place. And so I went back to school and studied economics. And of course, I think many of you know there's not a coincidence that there's ECO in the word ecology and ECO in the word economics. The ancient economists did not make that great separation as we do today. They did not externalize the environment. They did not externalize women. So glad that we have these ecological economics programs in place. worked for the Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean, and that's where I began to do the national income accounting work. And again, working with neoclassical economists, what are you doing now? So I said, I can blame Yale again. I can blame Yale again. And basically, it was the Minister of Natural Resources in Costa Rica who was gung-ho, and we went about revising the national income accounts. And we contracted with World Resources Institute, and Gus Speth was the head of the World Resources Institute at that time, who later became the dean here. In the Caribbean, I worked in about 14 countries. There was a structural adjustment, there was NAFTA. So here you're having to really do this work in terms of the contradictions that will come up with the traditional neoclassical model, where the idea is to grow, 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 grow. And even studying economics, I'd say, oh my goodness, that's not the theoretical paradigm that I understand. I understand how ecological systems work. And again, I get back to the systems thinking is so important, so that we can understand the reality in which we live and benefit from each other's knowledge and wisdom. The deputy director of the Middle Eastern program, after leaving the Caribbean, Yemen, Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco, it was at that point that I realized how much power the United States had. And as I began to go up in the ranks, it seemed as if the power that I was able to wield declined, because you were increasingly having to basically become the spokesperson for the White House. Bush was in the White House at the time. There were lots of debates, to say the least. And 9/11 happened at that, when I was working in that position. And I was actually in a meeting that morning. I had asked one of the Middle Eastern specialists to come and speak to my staff about the increasing anti-American sentiment in the Middle East concerning the U.S. We were on a conference call with our ambassadors based in Jordan and in Egypt. And our ambassador in Egypt said, a plane just went into the towers he had on CNN. So he's telling us from Egypt what had happened. And then we just thought it was a fluke, but we all know what happened. And so it was a turning moment. The last major position I had, I was acting director of the Southern Africa program. And here, again, I had a chance to talk to some of the students, the younger students, and thank you for the opportunity this afternoon. And some of them are in the arts, and we use the arts quite a bit in Southern Africa, particularly around HIV/AIDS. And the USA brought Takalani Sesame Street down to Southern Africa. We asked them to work themselves out of a job, if you will. Southern Africa had the talent, they had the music, they had the artistry, they had the stories, they had the storytelling, they had all of that. What they didn't have was the expertise in running the television show. So anyway, it's about 25 years syndicated right now, and it became the piece for educating. Now it's educating around the environment, where there's a little Muppet named Cammie who's 5 years old, and HIV positive, the little Muppet, and she runs out to the schoolyard, if you can imagine, and her best friend would not hug her. And then Cammie gets to tell the whole world, well, this is how HIV happens, this is how you get it, and we began to monitor what the viewership was, and we discovered more parents were watching than children, and so that became the education modality, because if someone walked into a clinic, you were in trouble because you were branded immediately. So the arts became very powerful. I began using it using the arts quite a bit in terms of reaching our development objectives. So I'm going to move into my own current research right now, and I'll do that swiftly. But for any of you who are engaged in the arts, I think it's one of the most a very powerful tool for transmitting information. And I encourage you also some of the work on the neuroscience and neuroepigenetics of art and of music making. It's really quite fascinating in terms of brain structure and brain development. So I encourage you to go forthrightly. I also wanted to recognize just 3 institutions in working on this research project that I'm about to introduce to you. One is the Edna Manley College for Visual and Performing Arts in Jamaica. The other is the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, and the other is the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Dr. Norman Denson, who had invited me there to study. So this is my logo for this project, Music and Human Rights, Connecting the Dots. I need to pull up the... Okay. So, so this is the website that I've developed for this project. It's not launched. The publishers that have expressed interest in this work have asked me not to launch this just yet, but I will talk to you from it. And this is basically the theoretical framework. Again, it is the transdisciplinary piece. Again, it's three parts. As I said, one is to look at the relationship between music and human rights through three lenses, and one is critical ethnography. And that's where I worked with the Jamaican music community, just to ask them about their experiences. The second part here is critical neuroepigenetics. That's where I have basically done a meta-analysis of the data developed since 2000 and just looking at what the data is saying about the brain, the body, and what happens to our brain and body when we create and make music, and when we create and make music also with other people, and also the neuroepigenetics of moral sensibility. And so putting that together so that we can have a better handle on basically the human body and music and human rights. And this third piece is the political economy of the global music sector. As you can see, this is the knowledge domain frame that I'm very keen on, the art, science, and humanities. And this is the theory, policy, and practice that I think is so critical. For the critical ethnography, I've interviewed about 125 people, primarily musicians, but also policymakers concerning music and also concerning human rights. For this meta-analysis on, for this meta-analysis, again, about 500 articles since 2002. And for the political economy, looking at the work at the global music sector through the political economy lens, which basically looks at the power relationships. So basically what I'm finding is that does anybody recognize any of these folks? Does anybody know who this guy is? So often, I find this picture very interesting because often when political economy comes from moral philosophy, and so here we have many moral philosophers. We have many philosophers, and so often we think of philosophy, I think in the West, is often philosophers who come from Europe or North America, but there are philosophers all around the world. So this political philosophy, actually, I'm drawing on the expertise of philosophers from Africa, from the Caribbean, from the Middle East, and I think there's a good bit of work being done even called Africana philosophy, which is a philosophy that honors the work that has been done through what we normally think as European philosophy, but also brings to the fore many of the issues around oppression and around race. And so I think it's important for these voices to be heard. There is a, let's see. As I mentioned before, the work is near completion, and the the International Communications Association, they have a competition wherein they honor scholars for translating their work into visual presentation. I am very committed to this because so much of the world, so many people in the world do not read and cannot read. I would like for much of my scholarship to benefit the communities where I have spent much of my time working and also where I have grown up. So this is slow. I didn't realize, I think it's because of the kind of connection that I have, maybe, that it's slow. I didn't realize that I was not able to connect directly. I would also like to say that what has happened as a result in terms of working in a transdisciplinary way and also working with some younger students and also interns, many of them have been quite excited about the project in that they have a chance to learn about these very different areas of scholarship, the ethnography, the neuroepigenetics, as well as the political economy, and also have a way of seeing that their artistry can make a difference. And so most of these young folks are doing great things now, and I just want to celebrate them as well. This is Dr. Agry Brown here. He's at the University of West Indies. He's one person I'd given a lecture in the Caribbean, and he said, you know, you do have to translate this work into visual text, into film. He said, and I do agree, I do think that the creative industries and the cultural artifacts and that we do have, particularly in poor communities, are so important in terms of the transformative past possibilities, perhaps some of the greatest sources of wealth available right now. And so for them to actually learn how to best use this capital, I think is essential. I'm just going to talk just briefly about some of the findings and implications, and then I think we should open this up for, I apologize for the slow internet. We were not able to hook up to the university internet. And so I'll know next time. I'll let that roll. But what we're finding in terms of, let me start with the neuroepigenetics. What we're finding with the neuroepigenetics research and the meta-analysis is that, how many of you are musicians or play a musical instrument? Yes, yes. Okay, so basically the research is telling us that for professional musicians have more gray matter in the three main parts of the brain than folks who do not play music and amateurs, and also, so structurally their brains are different, and also functionally they are different. Also, if you're using many of the tests in terms of intelligence, in terms of memory, music training is just makes an extraordinary difference. I'm afraid to click on one of these boxes for the fact that it will come up too slowly, so I'm just going to talk it through. And also the work that I've done in England, where we're working with children, and also the data over the last 20 years has suggested this. For those of you who might have played in a group, you have to listen. You have to listen to your compatriots. So if we had children being an exercise where they had to figure out how to clap together and make rhythm together. Or if you're in a small orchestra together, you end up developing a sense of community, you end up just developing a bit more trust, you end up developing a sense of cooperation. Also, in terms of moving over to the political economy side, what I'm finding is that the inequalities in the global music sector completely mirror those in the global economy. So you would have, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try. Okay. So basically you have such a small percentage of So basically, you have only 13% of the music income going to musicians who are making recorded music. The rest of that income goes to the distributors and the labels. And then of that, the top 1% of that 13% is taking about 99% of that income. And so when you look at the inequalities in the world, they're just strikingly similar. Also, when you begin to put data together, when you begin to look at some of these socioeconomic issues, and you look at the disparity, you're finding more and more children in high-income communities getting more and more music education, and the poor communities, you're getting less and less, and then you have this disparity going. If you have this disparity going in terms of income and also in terms of education, then you have some big questions. I should say that in my own experience, education was the huge injustice in terms of, in most states, the quality of education that you get is as tied to the income base of that community. You have the other inequalities in terms of the global music sector, in terms of, does anybody know what the fastest source of waste is today in the world? The fastest growing source of waste? Yeah, electronic waste, precisely, and music is a huge part of that. So for North America and Europe, we're exporting most of our waste, as you probably know, to Asia and Africa. So and there are just many wonderful things happening here. There are several short films that I have here, but I see someone here with the microphone. And I just want to go back to, I'll just make one last statement. So in terms of the other types of work that is going on, I had the opportunity to, because people have asked me over and over, how are you connecting this? I was asked to direct an opera last summer, La Pepura de la Rosa, and it's the oldest, it was the first opera ever performed in the Americas. And the musicians came from all over the world. We had about 20 musicians, extraordinary. And what they came to find out was that, and I had them all sitting on the stage, and I would go to someone and I would say, tell me your name and where you're from. My name is Lin, I'm from Korea. I said, what, and who is your character? They'd tell me the name, but they couldn't tell me too much about the character. I'd go to the next person and tell me what the play is, the opera's about. Oh, I think it's a love story. I said, okay, and the next person. They did not know, we are so siloed in our teaching, what the play was about. It happened, and these are just some pictures of our process. The opera was about, it happened to be an imperial opera. And it was, and so many of the operas of that time were. I had them bring out their scores. I said, let's go through the first few pages of the score in English. And it's hailed King Philip V, who's king of Spain. Spain was one of the biggest colonial conquering powers of the time. And I said, do you want to sing about that? They said, no, no, no. I said, well, we're going to do this in a collaborative way. How are we going to do this? And perhaps some of our theater people know about Augusto Boal. Do you know Augusto Boal? Okay, great. Collaborative theater director. But basically, we transformed it. They transformed it. We transformed it. And it was amazing. We had people in the audience from all over the community. The music was wonderful. What I had a chance to do, the music, bringing in the neuroscience, I was moving to the music. The music was extraordinary, beautiful, what some people will talk about as music being propaganda in many instances, be it the commercials that you watch, or in this case, it was the opera in terms of what we're doing is okay, and it's okay that, you know, France is getting a little bit stronger than us, and it's okay what we're doing around the world. But I was able to actually understand why it was that my body was responding the way, because those music and the rhythm was just extraordinary, and they used it to tell a certain message. So I'm going to end on the note about the importance of our messaging. I am in the College of Communications, and you are in a position just to do some extraordinary things with your work. I think we're in a critical juncture, and so the communication is important, and communicating across boundaries, across borders, across disciplines, across communities is just so key. And we can address the inequality, we can address the climate change, and we can address the violence. There's one little acronym that you might want to carry with you that I'm using quite a bit. This is part of my research. I just call it Dignity Through Art, Sciences, and the Humanities. That has to do with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that is the declaration to which I refer when I talk about human rights. And it might be something that you want to pay attention to for 2018. In 2018, coming up will be the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it might be a moment to begin to rally perhaps some type of event, and I would truly recommend it. I think every university in the country will be doing this, to rally some type of event that would actually ask the question concerning environment, human rights, inequality. It will be big, it will be big. I want to thank you for your time, and please, if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to take them.
We have time just for one or two questions, if anybody has a question they'd like to direct to our speaker.
My name is Kelechi Elenya from Nigeria, but I'm a student here, first year MEM. I want to appreciate your presentation. I just want to make a comment in terms of the flow into the humanistic communication, which I see that you are really working on, because is the gap that we need to really bridge in, achieving a lot of development challenges like tackling climate change and all that. And I'm happy that you are doing this kind of thing. But I don't know how widespread, what's the goal of what's the extent to which you want to reach with this program? Thank you.
Right. Right now, I'm just trying to complete the scholarship part of it, and though I have several film shorts, I should say that 90% of it, of the interviews that I've done, well, they've all been videotaped, and many films have been made just leading up to it. But first of all, I want to impact policy. I want to finish the book so that the book can talk for me when I am not present. And then once that is done, and I'm speaking to some of the young people in the back, I have a few film collaborators. One is Ala Kafkan, who renowned for her films on Nora, a dancer from Zimbabwe, renowned for her film on the slave trade, renowned for her films on many different important subjects. Anyway, so the idea is to get it out so that people can actually access it, and we will figure that out once the book is done, exactly how it will be done. But perhaps if anybody is interested, I can show one of the little films as you're going out, and anybody who wants to stay, I'll just leave it going on. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Yoromi Goodell. I'm an alum coming back to the school. I did my master's in forest science and a PhD. Thank you for that I only got half of the talk here, but I have a question for you. My father-in-law, who's blind, and has lived about 40 years being blind in the middle of Maine woods, was recently transferred to a living facility where he didn't have the cues from the environment, listening to the birds, knowing when to wake up, when to go to sleep. So that transformed the way he sees himself, in that he sometimes thinks he can see and he cannot separate nighttime and day. I'm wondering whether you know of any research where we've looked at children or adults, more interested in children, that can hear these natural sounds and cue into their world, the diurnal rhythms, and those that do not and live cities, and whether there's differences in the gray matter in their brains. So I'm very interested, because you said that those that are musicians and professionals, there are differences. And I know that people who meditate long term and those that do not or are novices at it have differences. Thank you for answering my question.
My answer is I have seen a good bit of research that has been produced on that. I do not know the details. I must admit I went straight to the issues around music development and moral development. But it is there. It is there. Perhaps you have studied it more fulsomely than I have, but I would encourage you, and it is just coming so fast. I also need to thank Yale for even having me generate that interest early on 30, 40 years ago, because I've been following the research. In the last 20 years, it has just exploded. So I would encourage you just to dig in and go find it, yes.
Hi, my name's Rebecca. I'm an MEM student here. I was interested if you could talk real quickly about how music in some ways transcends these economic, socioeconomic challenges, and that it's accessible to everyone and an important part of so many people's lives. However, you're talking about the benefits that we can see long term, and where does that disconnect happen between creating music and enjoying it, and those benefits versus the benefits?
Each chapter that I have of the book, I start with a personal story. The story on political economy, I start with a story where I'm in the middle of Niger in a desert, and we are trying to bring the desert back. That desert became desert in part because of the colonization, the monocropping, and what have you. Every night, however, singing would start. It would just start. And singing would start, and we would sing. And the women taught me the songs that only women were allowed to sing. And we sang, and the people, I'm going to say I was poor because I was in the same situation as everybody else. Those songs were incredible. So one way and those songs carried their stories. Those songs carried their human rights pleas. Those songs will never, ever, in the short term, reach you so that you can even hear what they're saying. I mean, it breaks down in so many ways, and this is where this structural piece comes in. So even from that piece to the point, this was the Tuareg group. I don't know if you've heard of the Tuareg. And so I look so much like the Tuareg. Everybody thought I was Tuareg, and that worked out very well. But now you have a major automobile company in Europe selling a car named the Tuareg, having songs about the Tuareg that the Tuareg could not hear because the Tuareg did not have electricity or the digital connection to hear or even to give back and to participate in the discourse. So it's just breaking down at every level globally in terms of who can participate in this musical phenomenon. And surely they have so much they can teach us. We are being deprived of what they know through their songs and also through their own ways of teaching music and learning music. But if you want me to be more specific, I just wanted to throw out that example. But if you wanted me to bring it to a contemporary moment, okay. But it breaks down. But here's where I go on the structural piece. Unless we get these structural pieces, we examine them closely, we're going to continue to replicate the same inequalities that we have now. And so to pay attention to these structures and the way the systems work is really key. Thank you for that question. Yeah, thank you for. Mhm. Okay.
So that Camila can certainly answer some questions if you're available to speak with some of our students, our guests that are here. We actually have some refreshments just right outside the auditorium here so that you can speak one-on-one or in a small group. I just want to thank you so much for coming back and
Thank you.
and enjoy your evening. And we hope you welcome you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Congratulations to you.